So if you're Betfair trading, tennis is a really interesting sport to trade. The unusual scoring system means that you get very large swings in odds over the course of the match, but it also means that a player that is very, very heavy odds on to win a match can still drift in price. From that perspective, when you're trading, you need volatility, and tennis has an awful lot of it. But the main question is, exactly what should you be looking for when you're Betfair trading on tennis? If you're interested in learning more about what I do, how and why, then visit the Academy, where you can get much more structured content. But you should also visit our website, where you can speak to like-minded people, download additional content and files, and of course you can also get hold of a free trial of the cutting-edge software that will completely transform your betting and trading. So the first thing that you need to be aware of is that tennis takes place around the world. There is the ATP, the Association of Tennis Professionals, that's the men's tour that takes place, and the WTA, the Women's Tennis Association. Both these tours migrate across the globe, and as a consequence there are very key differences not only between those two main tennis codes, but also the types of surfaces that they play on. So as you can tell, there are lots of different surface types used on both world tours, and they have very different characteristics. If we look at a Wimbledon, then the serve tends to be dominant at Wimbledon. Somebody who can hit the ball hard, either during service or during the game itself, stands a much better chance of winning a point. And as a consequence, even a small skill difference between those two players will be magnified massively at Wimbledon. In other words, it favours the favourites, people who can hit the ball hard and are proven to be able to do that better than another player, tend to be stronger favourites. At the time of recording this video, if you'd have laid the outsiders at Wimbledon, you would have made a pretty packet. But when we look necessarily at the women's game, they don't tend to be able to hit the ball as hard, so it's less of an advantage conferred on women. And as a consequence, those matches tend to be much more variable. So if you're trading a men's game at Wimbledon, you tend to sort of favour the favourite. But if you're trading a women's game, there's no particular bias that you would have within that. It tends to be much more variable. The match tends to swing around much more frequently. And if we look at Roland Garros at the French Open, which is played on clay or any clay court tennis tournament, then you tend to find the ball moves around slower, the ball bounces higher, and therefore a different dynamic is in play. And those two tournaments are at the opposite end of the scale, really. Wimbledon is a little bit more predictable and I think duller from a tennis perspective, whereas clay court tennis tends to be much more interesting and much more variable, throws up some more uncertain results. And when we look at hard courts, they tend to sit somewhere in between the middle. So from a broad perspective, if you're looking at Wimbledon, you would tend to favour, in the men's game, those big serving, hard-hitting players. The favourites tend to do particularly well at Wimbledon. But if we're looking at a clay course tournament, then necessarily that tends to behave a little bit differently. And there's a lot more uncertainty there. However, hard court is sort of somewhere in between those two. So you would tend to say that the most volatile, unpredictable matches tend to occur on women's clay court tennis, and the more predictable matches tend to occur on men's grass court tennis. Those are the two extremes that you would tend to find in a tennis tournament. So how would you make money trading tennis? Well, let me throw a big thing in for you here straight away. Fundamentally speaking, when you're looking at a two selection market, especially a highly variable one like a tennis match where the odds can change around all over the place quite dramatically, your objective is actually quite simple. All that you need to do is lay two players below two, or you could actually back two players above two. Those are your simple objectives. And the reason that this is the case is simply that if you lay two things at two, you'll break even. If you can lay two things at less than two, you will profit. And this is something that people sort of tend to miss when they're looking at tennis meets. You could make it as simple or as complicated as you like, but fundamentally your objective is that simple, really. If you can lay two players below odds of two, you will make money, or vice versa on the backside. So fundamentally speaking, if you want to structure a tennis trade in the very, very simplest forms that you could possibly ever imagine, that would be your starting point. You look at a match, you look at how those players are set up, and you're sort of thinking, is there going to be at some point during this match a situation where a player trades at odds on? And the simple answer is there are lots. So I've given you a quick scenario there of how you could make money at tennis trading, and that is just to lay 2 players below odds of 2. You know, that's pretty simple. But I hear some of you saying, well, how do you know that the odds are going to get below odds of 2? Well, this is why we created the tool called Tennis Trader, because you can point it at a match, you press a couple of buttons, and it will lay out for you all of the potential scenarios that will occur throughout that match. When you watch a tennis match and you watch how the odds move, you'll sort of see them do this. They'll sort of block up and block down and move around like that. And that is because the odds are reflecting what the current scoreline is. And what Tennis Trader does is it will look at a match and it will project forward where all of the odds could be. And from that, you'll be able to plot a path all the way throughout the entire match to find the situation where those odds are likely to occur. And you can take advantages in a number of ways. You can sort of anticipate that something's going to go there. You can put an order in and define your entry and exit point. Or if you're laying at odds below 2, you can sort of say, well, when is that likely to occur? Do I think that that is actually going to occur? And therefore, would I actually do that? But using a tool like Tennis Trader will allow you to actually frame your trade absolutely perfectly, or nearly perfectly, because you'll be able to say, well, this will be my entry point, this will be my exit point, and this will be where the odds reach my particular target at any point during the match. So it is actually perfectly possible to plan out and structure your trade in that manner when you're trading tennis. So when I trade tennis, I will either trade with a fixed stake, or if I'm on the lay side, then I will lay to a certain liability, and I don't change that throughout the course of the match. And the reason that you do that is if you assume that the market is efficient, which it generally is, then what you're actually doing is the market starts here and it finishes there, and you're trying to get in and out of the market as many times as you can before the match actually ends. So as a consequence, if you work with a fixed stake or you lay to a certain liability, the advantage that you get is the maximum loss that you've got is permanently fixed because you're not altering that stake. But the potential return you've got can multiply many times over. Also, your maximum loss is limited by the efficiency of the market. And if you want to really understand what I've just said there, go and watch a video that I did specifically on this topic that lays it out in beautiful detail for you so that you can understand just how low the barrier is for you to have to overcome in order to make money trading on tennis. Now, an interesting thing about trading tennis as well is very often you'll get very, very uncompetitive matches. This is where the players start at incredibly small odds and they are expected to go on to win that match, which most of the time they do. You get the odd shot now and again, but typically you get a lot of very, very short priced favourites on tennis. And it is because you're playing many hundreds of points sometimes, and as a consequence, the skill difference, even if it's small, amplified over 100, 200 or more points, will end up significantly favouring the better skilled player. And therefore you're thinking, well, those are impossible to trade, but actually they're not, because there's a lot of variability that takes place within a tennis match. And if a younger player or perhaps an unseeded player or a qualifier is coming up against a much better player, they've really got nothing to lose. So very often they go for it in that first set, throw everything into it, and it's possible that they could, just by getting a couple of beneficial points, actually go on to win that set or get a break of serve. But experience tells over a period of time, and because there are so many points within a tennis match for that skill to play out, eventually it does tip back in favour of the higher skilled player. But it makes for a very neat and easy trade to do. So if we look at the screenshot that I've got behind me here, this was Carlos Alcaraz playing a much lower rated player, and that lower rated player really went for it in that first set, managed to win the first set, but Alcaraz came back and went on to completely close out the match, as you would expect a more experienced player to do so. But just that little blip, that variation that we see in those odds when that situation occurs, allows us to gain a profit. So I have mentioned BetAngel before, and I make no excuses for mentioning it again, because we enhanced BetAngel over a number of years to include some tennis-specific trading tools, the biggest of which is Tennis Trader. Have a browse of the website if you want to learn a little bit more about all of the facilities within Tennis Trader. But fundamentally speaking, you can automate or you can get the automation to look for specific setups for you, like, the favourite has just lost the first set. And this is particularly helpful in tournaments where, the first or second round, there are loads and loads of matches going off at the same time. But also the speed at which you get data through Tennis Trader is hugely beneficial as well. So when I was watching Wimbledon, I captured this little video for you just to show you the difference between what you can see on the TV and how quickly those scores update in Tennis Trader. So I've superimposed the feed that I was getting from the BBC here on top of Tennis Trader and BetAngel. And Sinner is serving here at 30 love. You can see that on the score on Tennis Trader. And if we watch for a second, it moves to 40 love. So he's won that point. And if we look on the BBC feed, he's now won it there as well. So I've always enjoyed trading tennis because it's so variable. You tend to find that the matches tend to swing around all over the place, and just at the moment that you thought the player had lost it, he someone comes roaring back and all of those sort of things. And I'd say that's one of the things that you should probably watch for if you've never traded tennis before. It's not like in football where, you know, 1 or 2 goals can ultimately decide a match. In tennis, it's played out over hundreds of points, and as a consequence, especially given the scoring system, sometimes just when it looks like a player is down and out, they can turn around quite dramatically. And in fact, that sort of works against you from a trading perspective, because you almost have to be contrarian. You need to be looking for those points where the downside is fairly limited, but there is potential upside if that comeback starts to happen. And that's why tools like Tennis Trader were invented, to be able to frame that trade for you, to be able to identify and specify a risk within the market that you feel is suitable. But yeah, I've sort of, given you a quick run through of a few things here that you need to be aware of with tennis. There are other videos available, and of course, if you go onto the forum, you can hear and see people chatting about individual tennis matches and stuff. So you should check that out as well. But yeah, best of luck with your betting and trading.